Okay, I'm back. So we were talking about William of Orange and Mary, um, and I was saying that they were involved in the Glorious Revolution in England, which overthrew James II, the Catholic, and put on the throne of England a Protestant couple, Mary, who was and her husband William of Orange, a Dutch king. He was a king of Holland, and at the same time he became also a king of England. So that's really important for the history of America. In particular, the case of New York. New Amsterdam was a Dutch colony that the English took over and renamed it after King James II, who was overthrown. He was a Duke of York before he became king, so it was called New York. And when William of Orange took over England, there was no need then really to return New York back to Holland. So that's about William of Orange and Mary. Cecilius Calvert, the second Lord of Baltimore, represents a kind of a colony where a royal charter, a royal order, was issued to a particular person, in this case, the Lord of Baltimore. And that's really Maryland. Since Cecilius Calvert was a Catholic, that's really important because Maryland was the only colony that allowed Catholics to live there. It didn't last long. As such, it turned also the Protestants very soon, but it's an important exception that it's on the list under number 12. We have Roger Williams of Rhode Island, who was a Baptist, so descendants of the Puritans of New England. Puritans came into New England running away from the dynasty of Stuarts. That would be James I, Charles I, Charles II, and James II. The last one, James II, was the one who converted to Catholicism. But if you recall, English Reformation was not very radical, and it was created something that was called the Anglican Church, which is a church that was separate from Rome, but it looked like a Catholic church. The services in the Anglican Church are pretty much the same as in the Catholic Church, and that annoyed the radical reformers, the Puritans. So therefore, they did all things among them. They tried to come to America. And they did. They settled especially in New England. And there were various disagreements among them, among the Puritans. One of them here, Roger Williams, in particular insisted on not having infant baptism, and therefore created Baptists who baptize people only when they are in the age of consent. That is, when they're aware that they're becoming Christian actually. John Davenport of New Haven is another Puritan, founder of New Haven Colony. Not particularly important. I probably should have just left him out. But since we looked at the city of New Haven among the maps and stuff of that sort, then he ended up here. But he's, in other words, like Roger Williams, he's one of those Puritans, early Puritans, who came to New England and started New England colonies. In this case, the city of New Haven in Connecticut. William Penn was a Quaker. Another kind of Puritans. Puritans were people who were trying to purify the Anglican Church, so therefore they were radical Protestants. They were not in favor of the mainstream state Church of England, the Anglican Church, but they were, looking for various other options. William Penn was given the charter to start a colony called Pennsylvania, and it was a colony famous for its religious tolerance. Of course, religious tolerance here is within Puritanism, that is, within Protestantism. Various opinions among the Protestants were tolerated. We are moving to number 16, and that would be our chapter, 4, right? Colonial Society. So, let me see, let's have a look at other here. All right. All of these questions are related to one, that's 16, 17, 18, and 19, and 20, related to Great Awakening and Enlightenment. These two things come together. In other words, they were concurrent events. They're happening at the same time. Some people embraced Enlightenment as their religious view, and some people went back to the roots of religion and adopted a more traditional attitude. Jonathan Edwards is a preacher in Massachusetts, famous for his revivals. His sermons are, his most famous sermon is the sinner is in the hands of the angry God, which presented the fires of hell and the tortures of the damned in a horrible way, that people were, trembling and shaking and being afraid and things of that sort. So that was a part of the Puritan revival, which applies also to number 17, George Whitefield, one of the founders of Methodism, together with John Wesley. And that would really be a good answer, John Whitefield, one of the founders of Methodism, together with John Wesley. That, takes care of it. What is Methodism? Is a new way of Catholic religiosity, which puts emphasis a lot on feelings, on the internal warming of the heart. That's the expression that they used. That's another layer, another complication, another way of being Protestant in America. Oh, I'm about to sneeze, which is a good sign. Apparently, they say that if you have a virus, you don't sneeze. So, anyways, we have 3 more people here, 18, 19, and 20. I think I'm gonna put them together like Unitarianism. So instead of these 3, we'll have just one. What is Unitarianism? And it's a really important question. It's probably going to be there on the exam. Unitarianism is a form of deism. It denies essential Christian teachings, like the doctrine of the Trinity, divinity of Christ in this case. but argues, that there is only one God, that Jesus was just an extraordinary individual. And all these people were James Freeman, John Tolland, and Matthew Tyndall are connected with this movement that kind of, in other words, Enlightenment in Europe is connected with religion and the movement in religious thinking that is called deism, which is a belief in a God who follows the laws of nature, of science, and it's not mysterious. That's why, Christianity not mysterious. And that God doesn't perform miracles, doesn't answer to prayers, is just a God who set up this world. And that God is part of the Enlightenment tradition. In America and in England, this Enlightenment tradition takes the form of Unitarianism. And it's very important for America, especially for Massachusetts. I told you a joke about Unitarians. They believe in three things: unity of God, humanity of Christ, and vicinity of Boston. And they're largely located in Boston. That's their center, around Harvard University, and that's why they're important. They're part of the colonial history of America. We move now to 21. And so that would be our chapter 5, right? Our chapter 5, the American Revolution, yeah. So a lot of these people are from Boston, around Boston, because Boston was the heart of the American Revolution. That's where it all started. It's not where it ended, but that's where it started. Boston had a tradition of Puritanism, a tradition of opposition to the monarchical rule. They saw the monarch in the Anglican Church, in the Church of England, the State Church of England. Monarch is the head of the church. It's not like with the Catholic that there is a pope who is, separate of whoever is king and president and so on and so forth. But in the Anglican Church, the King of England, or now the Queen of England, is also the head of the church. Puritans were not crazy about it. So they often came in conflict with the kings of England. And in particular, we have under 21, King George III, who was the third king of the Hanoverian dynasty. Georges, namely George I, II, III, and IV, were the first four kings of the Hanoverian dynasty. And George I was a German from Hanover in Germany, who was brought over to England because there were not enough Protestant heirs to the throne, and he was kind of, given the throne of England with the idea that, the English aristocracy, the English Protestant aristocracy would run things, and they did so through the Parliament. So from George I of the Hanoverian dynasty, England becomes what is called the parliamentary monarchy. Namely, the Parliament runs the things with especially the person who controls the majority in the Parliament. And that is the two houses of Parliament, the House of Lords and House of Commons. And this was in accordance to the dominant party of the time, the Whigs, the Whig Party. Opposition to the Whigs were Tories, or the Conservatives. And King George had the misfortune of being the first Tory. He kind of, came to the throne and realized that his ancestors, George II and George I, were being played for fools. They were just giving paper to sign and, okay, go and, and have a happy life. Run the fields, go fox hunting, whatever the English aristocracy does. So George III actually wanted to take part in politics as a conservative. That was not welcomed in many places in Britain, of course, among the Whigs. And since Whigs are Protestants, radical Protestants, that had enormous effect in America. In addition to all the other issues that we've been talking about, that contributed to the dissatisfaction in Boston and Massachusetts, that caused the American Revolution. Number 22, Benedict Arnold, famous as one of the right-hand men of George Washington, somebody who George Washington really trusted. He betrayed the cause of the colonial rebellion of the American independence and went over to the British. He's just there not only to be remembered as a traitor to the American cause, but as a reminder of the fact that not all colonials were in favor of the American Revolution, in favor of the American independence. Some actually were opposed to it. That's why Benedict Arnold. John Hancock, number 23, was person who first signed the Declaration of Independence. He signed it big so that the King George can actually read his name, and that's why he's here in relationship to the Declaration of Independence. We hold this truth to be self-evident, and so on. Paul Revere is a hero of the American Revolution, in particular in Boston. There was a famous Paul Revere's ride where actually he saw British troops moving towards Lexington and Concord, which were outside of Boston, and he wanted to give a signal to the colonial soldiers, colonial militia, to get ready for the Brits are coming. So therefore they used lanterns from a steeple of the largest church in Boston at the time, from where they, if you lift one lantern, that means that they're coming by the sea, and so there was a signaling going on. Just to make a long story short, there was signaling going on with these lanterns, and Paul Revere received the signal and took his horse and galloped all the way to Lexington and Concord to let the colonial militia know that the British are coming, so they were they were ready when they come, and they were ready. Anyways, so that's the beginning of the American Revolution. John Adams here is number 25, not as a president, but as a lawyer for the British soldiers in the so-called Boston Massacre. It's one of those things that actually led to the American Revolution. Boston Massacre, some drunken people were harassing British soldiers guarding the old State House in Boston. They opened fire, killed a couple of people. There was a trial, and actually John Adams, the future president, decided to defend these British soldiers against the accusation. He was not popular for this stance, especially among the revolutionaries. So anyways, that's about that Boston Massacre. Really, the question 25 is about the Boston Massacre, one of those events that led to the American Revolution. Number 26 is Thomas Paine. Thomas Paine was an Englishman who had a very interesting career. He came over to the United States to take part in the American Revolution, the War of Independence. And then he went to France and took part in the French Revolution and became a member of the French National Assembly, even though he didn't know a word of French. But he was a revolutionary, so they gave him a pass on that. And then he came back to America and tried to convince Americans that religion is stupid, and therefore ended his life as a bit of an outcast. But in this case, Thomas Paine is here as part of our chapter 6, as somebody, 5 and 6, right? American Revolution 5 and 6, the new nation. Okay, 5 and 6. In particular, it's somebody who was the author of the tractate Common Sense, which argued that America should be independent. Oh, pardon me, my allergies are getting better actually. The more I sneeze, the better off I am. So, Thomas Paine, the author of tractate Common Sense, which among other things contains a sentence like, how can a country like Great Britain rule over a continent like America? That's not right, and therefore America should be a separate country, and so on and so forth. During the dark days of the War of Independence, especially after the defeat of George Washington in New York and New Jersey, in Brooklyn, in Manhattan, and then in Washington Heights, in the northern part of Manhattan, Washington withdrew across the Delaware River into Pennsylvania, and there he ordered his troops to be read Thomas Paine, Common Sense, to give them courage and strength to persevere in the struggle. 27 is now about John Jay. In this case, in particular, about John Jay Treaty. So we are past the War of Independence, and we are now getting into the early Republic. The presidency of George Washington, which started on the 31st of April of 1789. George Washington took an oath of office here in New York as our first president. The first issue that immediately popped up during the presidency, the first big crisis that popped up during the time of George Washington, was the French Revolution. John Jay was of the opinion that during this French Revolution, United States should side with Great Britain, which is opposed to the French Revolution. And he insisted that, United States signs a treaty that will allow trade between Britain and America, which was really a hostile act towards revolutionary France. So there were a lot of people in America who were opposed to it, in particular Thomas Jefferson. But that's why number 27, John Jay, is here as the author of the Jay Treaty, which was signed under Washington and kind of oriented America towards alliance with Great Britain against revolutionary France. Number 28 is Alexander Hamilton, a New Yorker, another New Yorker, actually born in the Caribbean. born in the Caribbean. He was Secretary of State under George Washington's presidency, and he was very important for the northeast area of the country in which we lived. His vision for the country was for a strong central government that meant in particular strong presidency at the expense of the legislature, and for the development of this part of the country as manufacturing, industry, and trade. The main ports of the United States, Newark, New York, Boston, Philadelphia are here, Baltimore are here on the eastern seaboard. Therefore, trade is our life. That's how most of us make a living here. And that was a vision embraced by Alexander Hamilton. He was also very important in managing the issue of debt, which arose out of the War of Independence, including the creation of the first Bank of America, which was the national bank that was supposed to manage this debt and so forth, which was something that made his opponents furious, including, of course, most famously Thomas Jefferson. Patrick Henry, I don't know, he was, taken as an example of the as an example of opposition to George Washington and his policies by the Democratic Republican, the anti-federalists, or what I call simply as Democrats. So I don't know, maybe we should take him out. Well, let's do that. Take Patrick Henry out. Famous for, he's saying, give me liberty or give me death. But let's take him out so we have a round number of 30 people. Take him. Okay, so Patrick Henry is out. And we have number 30, John Adams, another example of Federalists, people who, took part in the deliberations over the Constitution. And then he was the second vice president under George Washington, then the second president after 2 terms of George Washington. He was the second president of the United States. He was very unpopular due to his stance against the French Revolution and against the agitation in favor of the friendship with the French Republic that the Democrats were practicing in his time. And therefore, he started this Sedition Act, Alien Sedition Act, in 1989 to kind of lessen the influence of the French Revolution on the American society. So, in short, that's the presidency of the second president of the United States, John Adams. Number 31, or if we take out Patrick Henry, as we will, that will be the last one, Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson was the leader of the opposition to the presidency of George Washington and John Adams. He was the leader of the so-called Democratic Republicans, or anti-federalists. That's an interesting. The Democratic Republicans means that it's a division among the Republicans, people who are for the Republic. So because Hamilton and Adams were also Republicans, they were, but Thomas Jefferson would say that, these were monarchical Republicans. They were, for a republic in the name only, but they wanted a strong presidency, and therefore having a king of kinds, an elected king. So that's why, Thomas Jefferson Party is called Democratic Republicans, or simply Democrats. And that's about it. He defeated John Adams in the elections of 1800 and became the third president of the United States in 1801, and was president for 2 terms, but that we continue after the exam, right? Okay, so that's about it. I don't know, I can give you some clue, what is really important here. Some of these ideas that will surely be on the exam. Let's see. King George III, Thomas Paine, Alexander Hamilton, Thomas Jefferson, Unitarians, Dutch West India Company, and domestication of maize. Maybe also Isabel of Castile. So those, pay special attention to these. All right, what we'll do is, I'll pick 10 out of these, and we do the exam, I don't know, Wednesday maybe, Friday. Depends how you feel. It doesn't really matter because there are other things to do. There'll be multiple choice part, there'll be IDs, there is an essay that you need to write. So basically this week is going to be about taking an exam. This is as much as I will, talk about things. This week it's up to you to take care of the exam. Good luck with that. Good luck with our crisis here with the Wuhan virus and related issues. People are losing jobs and things of that sort. So it's we have a bit of a situation. But be that as it may, we continue working here, getting ready for the exam, and my greetings to you. Bye.